Hello everyone, how are you doing today? Again, a new course is brought to you by Unacademy, and today we'll be focusing on the NCERT Science Class 9th. This video is just about the course overview on what all topics we'll be covering in this course, and this is presented to you by me, Deepanshu Singh. So this is a brief introduction about me. I have done my BTech in Computer Science with honors from UPSC Lucknow, and I have been an NTSC zonal topper. Apart from that, I have appeared for Civil Services and Indian Forest Services mains examination thrice, and these are my interests. And as you all know that these courses are absolutely free. So in case you feel like you should contribute to the course. So the target audience of this course will be specifically for the civil services aspirants and also the students who are willing to give state services examination and the SSC exams. The course objective is that we'll be understanding the science concepts which are relevant for these competitive exams, and we'll be specifically focusing on the UPSC Prelims 2017 examination. The course no, in this course we'll be covering all the chapters in detail, and the portions which are relevant for the examinations. We'll be skipping the numerical part and the calculation part of the chapters, and we'll focus on the chapters which have a high probability of coming in the examinations. So depending on that, there are overall 15 chapters in this booklet, and we can categorize them according to the specific subjects. For example, in chemistry there are four chapters like matter in our surroundings, and this matter around us pure, atoms and molecules, and the structure of the atoms. These are like very basic chapters, but still there can be some questions which can come up in the examination. Similarly, there are some chapters which specifically are part of the physics, and these are related to motion, gravitation, forces and laws of motion, work and energy, sound. uh, Particularly, there are some questions in these examinations from sound, so we'll look this chapter in detail. And then obviously there are some chapters which focus on biology, and miscellaneous chapter which focus on the environmental part. As you all know that environment is a big focus for UPSC exams in recently, so we'll be covering these all chapters in detail. Like fundamental unit of life, these are related to the cells, tissues, diversity in living organisms. Like last year there was one question on the classification of the living organisms, and why do we fall ill is an important chapter. We'll be covering the health related aspects and the diseases, and why do we fall ill, and what are the treatment and prevention strategies. And then there are like natural resources and improvement in food resources. So these all chapters we'll be covering in this course. So please feel free to contribute to these courses, as it really helps us in motivating us in coming up with better video courses and more engaging courses. If you feel that these courses are really helpful to you. So this is a quote which I really like from Benjamin Franklin, and it's related to teaching and learning experience. And it's like, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, and involve me and I learn." So basically, learning should be an involving process. It should be an engaging process. So please give us a feedback, and if you have any suggestion, please write to us, and please put down your comments below the video. And that's it, I guess. From the next video onwards, we'll be starting with the chapters. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much, and have a good day. Hello everyone, how are you doing today? As I told you in the overview video, that we'll be covering the NCERT Science Class 9 subject, and this video series will be presented by me, Deepanshu Singh. So this is a brief introduction about me. I have done my BTech in Computer Science with honors from UPTU Lucknow, and apart from that, I have been a debating champion and an NTSC zonal topper. And I've also appeared for Civil Services and Indian Forest Services mains examination three times, and I have varied interests. I have so many interests, but then some of them are listed over here. They are basically music and singing and football and photography. And as you know, that these courses on an academy are absolutely free. So if you feel, you can also contribute to the course, and yeah, you can also follow me on an academy. So the first chapter talks about the matter, and as we all know that everything in this universe is made up of a material named matter, and matter has both mass and volume.
So and these and the matter is made up of very very small fine particles, and there are spaces between these particles. For example, uh, suppose you have tea, sugar, and salt. There are, when you look it under a microscope, and these particles of matter have very very fine spaces depending if they are solid, liquid, or gas. So we'll cover that in the next slide. But then these particles intermix with each other by a process called as diffusion. So here you can see the diffusion process. For example, if you take a lump of sugar or a sugar cube, and if you dip it in the water, the sugar cube will slowly disintegrate into finer particles, and by a process known as diffusion, it will completely mix with water. So, and one important property about diffusion is that it increases with temperature, because as kinetic energy increases, when you increase the temperature, the kinetic energy of the molecules increase, and the particles move really fast. So that in a way increases the process of diffusion. So here are some of the properties mentioned of solid, liquid, and gas. Solids are basically rigid; they have fixed shape and fixed volume, and they cannot be squashed. And liquid, they are not that rigid, and they have no fixed shape, but they have fixed volume. Right? They can take the shape of any container or vessel in which they are poured, and they also cannot be squashed. And gases, for example, are not rigid. They do not have any fixed shape, and they do not have any fixed volume. They can be compressed, they can be squashed. That is, for one example of that, your compressed natural gases or LPG gases, they are stored in cylinders. So that basically defines about gases. Now, we're looking at the first state of matter, that is a solid state. As I told you before, they have definite shape, distinct boundaries, fixed volume, and they have negligible compressibility. And they may break under force, but it is difficult to change their shapes as they are quite rigid. And for example, if you take a rubber band, it will change its shape, and the shape of salt crystals also remains fixed. These are the examples which are mentioned in the book. So but then you can break the rubber band after its elastic limit, but you cannot compress it, because as you see in the diagram, the solids, they have very 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 strong bonds, so it's really difficult to compress them. Next state is the liquid state. They do not have any fixed shape, but they have fixed volume, and they take the shape of any beaker or vessel, or whatever thing you pour them into. So that is about liquids, and these particles have greater spaces between them, as we have read before and I told you before, and that is why they have a higher rate of diffusion than solids, because they have large intermolecular spaces, so they can diffuse faster, right? Next. So gaseous state. Okay, so particles move randomly at very high speed, and the rate of diffusion is the highest and fastest in gases. Obviously, intermolecular space is largest, highest, most number of intermolecular spaces. For example, if you're sitting in some other room and there's something cooking really nice in your kitchen, you can sense the aroma, you can sense the smell, and that is because of the process of diffusion. And obviously CNG and LPG gases are example of how gases can be compressed into small containers, and that is why, because they have very high compressibility. Okay, so these are some properties about matter. The states of matter are interconvertible by changing temperature and pressure. Very common stuff, but then still we need to learn. On increasing the temperature, the energy supplied by heat overcomes the forces of attraction between particles, causing melting of solids. Okay, and this temperature at which the solid melts at the atmospheric pressure is called as its melting point, and the temperature at which liquid starts boiling at the atmospheric pressure is known its boiling point, right? So this is a graph. This will tell you basically on the x-axis, on the horizontal axis we have the energy input, and on the y-axis or the vertical axis we have the temperature. So as we increase the temperature, the energy of the particles increases, therefore we have a vertical graph. But then as you know, but after a certain point of temperature, the temperature at which a particular state of matter changes to another state of matter, there will be a fixed temperature, but the energy will change. And these part in the red part, will read about them in later slides, are known as the latent heat, the hidden heat, because the heat or the energy provided, the latent energy provided or the hidden energy provided, does not cause a rise in their temperature, but it definitely gives rise to a change in state. Okay,
So the energy required to bring about this change of state known as latent heat or hidden energy, and this energy is absorbed by the substance without showing any rise in their temperature. And sublimation refers to the change of state directly from solid to gas and vice versa. Camphor is an example of that. And latent heat of these are like standard definitions. You just need to be aware of them for some random MCQs. Latent heat of vaporization is the heat energy required to change 1 kg of a liquid to gas at atmospheric pressure at its boiling point. And the latent heat of fusion is the amount of energy required to change 1 kg of solid into liquid at its melting point. So as you can see from this graph again, the previous one as well, the similar graph, but then a little change in the description. Latent heat of fusion is the temperature remains the same and constant as solid turns into liquid because there is no rise of temperature, but the state changes. And similarly is the latent heat of vaporization. Okay. Now, pressure is basically, applying pressure. These are the certain effects of, various things that have effect on, melting or boiling. So applying pressure and reducing the temperature can basically liquefy gases. Example of that will be the solid CO2, carbon dioxide, or also known as dry ice. And one important property of boiling is that it is a bulk phenomena. Okay. And evaporation, the rate of evaporation basically increases by increasing the surface area. Obviously, you have more area for evaporation for the substance, and as you increase the temperature, it gives rise to more kinetic energy, and more wind speeds, creates a more environment for the particles to evaporate. And as you decrease the humidity, obviously, if the atmosphere is already saturated, you cannot add more particles from a liquid state to gaseous state. So basically, rate of evaporation depends on these factors. Now, cooling effect of evaporation, if you wear a cotton clothes in summers, that you feel a little cold because the sweat, evaporates, keeping you a little colder and making you feel a little cool. And then acetone, if you rub acetone in your hands, it will suddenly evaporate because it has very low evaporation point. And then sprinkling of water on rooftops in summers, you feel a little cooler below that. That is because of the cooling effect of evaporation. So this is a graph depicting the changes of various states of matter and what are they are correspondingly called. And plasma, these are the two things that were mentioned in NCERT, so I thought I should include it. You can pause the slide and you can read about them as well. So plasma is basically a super energetic and a supercharged particles. They are example used in neon bulb and fluorescent tube. And Bose-Einstein condensate is a new state of matter formed by cooling a gas of extremely low density to super low temperatures. Okay, so this is an example of 3 states of matter, and what is the 4th state of matter, that is plasma is. So you can pause the slide and you can go through it and let me know if you have any issues. So I guess this is it about our first chapter, and I'll see you in the next video. I hope you like the video series, and please give a thumbs up and do rate the video series. If possible, give us 5 stars, and if you feel like, you can also contribute to the course. Thank you and have a good day. Hello guys, how are you doing today? So today we'll be bringing you another interesting lesson of NCERT Science Class 9th, and these video series are brought to you by Unacademy and will be presented by me, Deepanshu Singh. And this is a bit of information about me. I have done my BTech in Computer Science with honors from UPTO Lucknow, and I have been a debating champion and as well as an NTSC zonal topper. Apart from that, I have appeared in Civil Services and Indian Forest Services main examinations thrice, and I have varied interests. Some of them are listed down over here, and they are basically in music and football, singing, and photography. And as you all know, that this video series are absolutely free for you, but if you feel like that these courses have been beneficial for you in any way, you can also feel free to contribute. And yeah, if you feel like, you can also follow me in an academy. So taking our the video series forward, in the next chapter, today we look at some of the important concepts of atoms, molecules, and their composition. So firstly, mixtures are made up of more than one kind of a pure form of matter known as a substance, and as a substance cannot be separated from other kinds of matter. So this is an important concept. try and differentiate between a substance and a mixture. Now, we can have either two types of mixtures. One is homogeneous and other is heterogeneous. Homogeneous example of that will be a salt in water. It can easily mix in water, so it's an homogeneous mixture. And then heterogeneous is oil and water. Obviously they do not mix well, they do not mix in well, in fact, and you can see oil always floats above the water. So that is an example of a heterogeneous mixture. Now, a solution is a homogeneous mixture of two or more substances. Solids, and an example can be solid of for solids is alloys, and therefore obviously gases is also a homogeneous mixture of two or more substances. Now, because of a very small size of particles, they do not scatter light, and we can either have a saturated or an unsaturated solution. So here is a diagram depicting the states of matter. We have matter, either they are pure or there is a mixture. So pure substances can be either an element or a compound. Obviously a compound is made of more than one type of elements, and mixtures, as I told you before, can be homogeneous or heterogeneous. Okay. And now, the materials that are insoluble in a solvent and have particles that are visible to naked eyes, they form a suspension. And colloids are example of that. Colloids are generally heterogeneous mixtures in which the particle size is too small to be seen with the naked eye, but is big enough to scatter a light. And this is known as the Tyndall Effect. You can see the Tyndall Effect over here. If you go to a dense forest and you see the light being scattered by the sun rays, being scattered by the trees, this is basically a Tyndall Effect. So Tyndall Effect can be observed when the sunlight passes through the canopy of a dense trees. Common examples of these are the liquid and gases. Basically, they are known as aerosols, and solids and solids are, an example of that can be gemstones. So, and these colloids can be separated by a special technique known as centrifugation. So I want you guys to do one assignment, just explain in brief, in short, what is centrifugation, how does it take place, and how does it happen, how do we go by this process, in the comments section down below. Okay. So yeah, so here is an example of colloids. How what kind of colloids are there, and if there is substance 1 and there is substance B. So a gas on gas, they generally are very intermixable, miscible, so they do not form a colloid. But then if you have a gas on liquid, they have liquid aerosols. So you can pause the slide, you can go through it, what all examples are there for different types of substances that make colloids. And now, this is a very important area for UPSC examination or some state service examinations. They always ask you questions related to physical and chemical changes. So we'll look at them one by one. So the interconversion of a state is a physical change because these changes occur without a change in composition and no change in the chemical nature of the substance. Okay, very, very, very important. There's no change in the chemical composition and there's no change in the chemical nature of the substance. There's only a change of physical state. That is why it is known as physical change, not a chemical change. An example of, and here you can differentiate between them, between a chemical and a physical change. Chemical, it cannot be easily reversed, and generally there are new products formed, and all the reactants which are used in this process of a chemical change, they are all used up, and often heat, light, sound, and fizzing occurs. And electricity can also be produced. They may be produced, and example of that will be a wood burning. If you burn a wood, that is a type of a chemical change because the reactant, the wood is finally burned into some other state. Obviously, it's converted in some other state, but then it's an irreversible process. You cannot get it back, right? You cannot get the log of wood back from the ashes. So that is why you burn up in the ashes, right? So physical changes, easily reversible, no new products, often just a state change. Example that will be ice, melting of ice, boiling of water. So these are the physical changes because there is no change in the chemical composition. They are easily reversible. You can get one or the other, right? Okay. Now, elements, a basic form of matter that cannot be broken down, as I told you, into simpler substances by chemical reactions, and can be divided into three types: metals, non-metals, and metalloids. You can see the diagram over here. It's a Venn diagram. You can see the common point between them: metal and metalloids, and non-metals and metalloids. Okay, And some properties of matter are that they have luster, they shine, they are ductile, they can be drawn into thin wires. Malleables means they can be beaten down into sheets. Sonorous, they produce sounds and they conduct heat and electricity. Okay. Now, they one thing they lack is that they do not have a lot of colors, but non-metals obviously have a variety of colors. And metalloids have intermediate properties between metals and non-metals. Example of that will be silicon, germanium, boron, etc. Now, compounds. A compound is a substance composed of two or more different types of elements chemically combined in a fixed proportion. Now, properties of a fixed element of a compound are different from its, obviously, the property of a compound will be different from its constituent elements, whereas a mixture shows the properties of its constituting elements or compounds, right? So this is a difference you need to be aware of. Now, atoms and molecules. Atoms are, as we all know, but then if you don't know, then we can learn about it over here. Atoms are tiny, indivisible particles. You cannot divide an atom. It's indivisible, which cannot be created nor destroyed in a chemical reactions. They form the basis of any chemical reaction. It cannot be destroyed, right? Okay, an atom is the smallest particle of the element that cannot usually exist independently. Atom can never exist independently, and they always retain its chemical properties. A molecule is the smallest particle of an element or a compound capable of independent existence under ordinary conditions. So atoms is not capable of existing independently, but a molecule can. So remember this. Now, compounds composed of metals and non-metals contains charged species. These charged species, as you all know, are known as ions. They can be either positively or negatively charged. Now, during a chemical reaction, the sum of the masses of the reactants and the products remains unchanged. They do not change at all. This is known as the law of conservation of mass. Okay, if you want to read about it, just pause the video and make down some short points. And in a pure chemical compound, elements are always present in a definite proportion by mass. This is known as the law of definite proportions. Now, valency is the combining capacity. It is known as the combining capacity of an atom. Not much of a detail to look into, and not the chemical questions related to chemical reactions do not come in exams generally, relevant to government exams. Now, looking at some of the important concepts mentioned in the book in this particular chapter, just a brief overview about it, not much in detail. Okay, not required basically. The atomic number of an element is the same as the number of protons in the nucleus of an atom, and the mass number of an atom is equal to the number of nucleons in its nucleus. And isotopes are items of the same element which have different mass numbers. But then most of you must not be knowing isobars. They are atoms having the same mass number but different atomic numbers. So calcium 20 and argon 18 have the same mass numbers, but they have different atomic numbers. So you can take a look over here in detail, pause the slides. So I hope you just like the video series, give a thumbs up, give us 5-star ratings, and do rate and review, do share it among your friends. Let me know your suggestions in the comment boxes below. And I hope you like this video series. And that's about it for this video. Thank you and have a good day. Hello everyone, so continuing with this video series, today we'll be looking at another chapter known as the Fundamental Units of Life of NCERT Science Class 9th. And as you all know, that this video series is brought to you by Unacademy and being presented by me, Deepanshu Singh. So this is just a brief introduction about me, and if you feel that these courses are helping you in any way, please feel free to contribute. And you can also follow me on Unacademy. Now, the fundamental organizational unit of the life is the cell, and amoeba, paramecium, bacteria are example of single or unicellular organisms, and fungi, plants, and animals are the examples of multicellular organisms. Now, every multicellular organism has come from a single cell. How do we know that? Because cells divide to produce cells of their own kind, and therefore all cells have come from pre-existing cells. Cells have got certain specific components within it known as the cell organelles, which perform specific functions. Now, all these cells are found to have the same organelles no matter what their function is or what organism they are found in. This is an important point. We need to keep this in mind. Now we'll be looking at the structure of a cell. 3 features are common in every cell. Those are the plasma membranes, nucleus, and the cytoplasm. Now, the plasma or the cell membrane is the outermost covering of the cell that separates the contents of the cell from its external environment. Now, diffusion is the process through which exchange of gases and water takes place in a cell. Suppose there is a higher concentration of, say, carbon dioxide inside a cell, so that the cell will expel the higher amount of carbon dioxide to absorb the amount of oxygen required to carry out specific functions from its surrounding. And similarly, water also follows the principle of diffusion. Now, osmosis is a special case of diffusion which takes place through a selectively permeable membrane. And we have to look into two specific cases here. One is the hypotonic solution and the hypertonic solution. Hypotonic solution is the one in which there is a very dilute concentration of a certain substance. Say, for example, if the surrounding area of a cell has a higher water concentration than the cell, then meaning that that specific solution is very dilute, and therefore the cell will absorb the excess amount of water and it will swell up, and accordingly, if the surrounding area is having a higher concentration of the substance, or it's less dilute and very concentrated, so the cell will lose water and it will shrink in size. So therefore, this is known as an hypotonic solution. And always remember that the water always moves from hypotonic to hypertonic, from hypo to hyper. So now, plant cells, in addition to the plasma membrane, have another rigid outer covering known as the cell wall, which is made up of cellulose, and it enables the cells to withstand changes in outer surroundings. The nucleus in eukaryotes is separated from the cytoplasm by a double layered membrane, and it directs the life processes of the cell. Also, the organisms whose cells lack nuclear membrane are called as prokaryotes. An example of prokaryotes is bacteria. And the nucleus contains chromosomes, and as we all know, that these chromosomes contain the DNA molecules which are important for inheritance during cell division. And the cytoplasm is the fluid content inside the plasma membrane, and the cytoplasm contains these special cell organelles which we'll be looking forward in the next slides. Now, looking at the cell organelles, the first one is the endoplasmic reticulum. It is a large network of membrane-bound tubes and sheets which functions both as a passageway for intracellular transport and as well as a manufacturing surface. There are two types of endoplasmic reticulum. One is the rough ER and another one is the smooth ER. The rough ER looks like a rough surface under the microscope, and they are a site of protein manufacturing. And the smooth ER is a site of manufacturing of fats and lipids. Now, the Golgi apparatus consists of stacks of membrane-bound vesicles that functions in the storage, modification, and packaging of substances. Now, lysosomes are a kind of waste disposal system of the cell, which contains strong digestive juices. Now, mitochondria, as we all know, is known as the powerhouse of the cell. It generates energy through ATP, and have their own DNA and ribosomes. Now, one important thing about the cell membrane, which I forgot to mention, is that in some cases, like amoeba, it can be also used to engulf the food from its external environment, and such processes are known as endocytosis. So the next cell organelles are the plastids, and they are only contained in plant cells, and these are a membranous organelles, and these are of two types. So one is the chromoplast and the leucoplast. Now, chromoplast can contain chlorophyll and therefore known as chloroplast, and they perform the photosynthesis. And the primary function of leucoplast is storage. Now, most mature plant cells have a large central vacuole that helps to maintain in the turgidity of the cell and stores important substances, including the wastes. Now, these are generally small in animal cells, and they are also used in amoeba for food storage. Now, like the mitochondria, plastids also have their own DNA and ribosomes. So this is all in this video. We'll be looking to the next chapters in the next one. Thank you so much, and have a good day. Hello everyone, so back again today with another video lesson of NCERT Science Class 9th. Today we'll be looking at chapter on tissues. This is the lesson 4 of this, brought to you by Unacademy and being presented by me, Deepanshu Singh. This is a bit of introduction about me, and if you feel that these courses are helpful for you, so you can also contribute to the course and you can follow me on Unacademy. Are a group of cells that are similar in structure or work together to achieve a particular function, and there are certain differences about plant tissues and animal tissues because plants require different amount of energy as compared to animals, and they are less mobile than animals, and most of the tissues in plants are dead and they are mostly of supportive in nature as compared to animal tissues. Now, plant tissues are of two main types. The one is the meristematic tissue and the permanent tissue. The meristematic tissue is the dividing tissue present in the growing regions of the plant. These are the apical, intercalary, and the lateral. Now, the apical meristem is present at the growing tips of the stems and roots, and it increases the length of the stems and the roots. And the girth of the stem increases due to the lateral meristem. And the intercalary meristem is the meristem at the base of the leaves or internodes on the twigs. Now, the permanent tissues are derived from meristematic tissue once they lose their ability to divide, and the permanent tissues can be classified into simple and complex tissues. Now, the simple permanent tissues are of examples are the parenchyma. These they are basically loosely packed and they provide support in food. And if the parenchyma contains chlorophyll, these are known as the chlorenchyma. Now, in aquatic plants, there are certain air cavities present in parenchyma and which provide buoyancy in floating. They help in floating, and these are known as the aerenchyma. Now, collenchyma provides flexibility and it aids in bending in leaf stalks. And the sclerenchyma makes the plant hard and stiff. An example of sclerenchyma can be the coconut husks. They are present in the stems and seeds and of nuts. Now, these sclerenchyma are basically long and narrow, and they are thickened due to a presence of a substance which acts as a cement known as lignin. Now, these tissues provide strength to the plant parts, and the outermost layer of cells is of these cells are known as the epidermis, and often the aerial parts of some plants in desert areas, especially, often they secrete a waxy water resistance layer on the outer surface, which is known as the cutin coating, which aids in protection against loss of water and also helps in preventing mechanical injury and invasion by parasitic fungi. Now, there are some small pores present on the epidermis of the plants, which is enclosed by two kidney-shaped guard cells, which is known as the stomata. Now, stomata helps in exchange of gases and with the atmosphere, and it is also a site of transpiration, which is a loss of water in the form of water vapor. Now, as plants grow older, the outer protective tissue undergoes certain changes, and therefore the secondary meristem replaces the primary one. The replaces the epidermis, and the cork, the stem of the plant. Now, the cells of these cork are dead and they are compactly arranged without any intercellular spaces. And these also contain a chemical called as suberin, which makes them impervious to gases and water. Now, complex permanent tissues. The complex permanent tissues are of two types. These are the xylem and the phloem. Now, xylem conducts water only vertically, and the phloem conducts the food both. And xylem consists of tracheids, vessels, and xylem parenchyma. And these have thick walls, and most of them are dead cells. And the xylem parenchyma stores foods and helps in the sideways conduction of water. And phloem is made up of four elements. These are the sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem fibers, and the phloem parenchyma. Now, sieve tubes are the tubular cells with perforated walls, and phloem are basically living cells except the phloem fibers. Now, coming to the animal tissues, blood and muscles are examples of animal tissues. There can be many more examples. Now, one of the animal tissues are the epithelial tissues. These provide a protective covering to the animal body, and these epithelial tissues can be classified into four types. These are the squamous, the cuboidal, the columnar, and the ciliated, and the glandular. Mostly five types. And the squamous cells are extremely thin and flat, and they form a delicate lining, like for example present in the mouth. And the cuboidal epithelium is present in the salivary glands, in the kidney linings, where they provide mechanical support. The columnar epithelium facilitates in movement across the epithelial barrier. They are present in the respiratory tract, and they are known as cilias, which are hair-like projections on the outer surface of the epithelial cells. And the ciliated ones are also present in the intestines. Now, the glandular epithelial is formed when the glands they are bent inwards, and they form the glands in multicellular organisms. Now, connective tissue, example of connective tissues can be blood and bones, and blood has a fluid liquid matrix called the plasma, in which there are red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets are suspended. Now, ligaments connect two bones, and tendon, bone, and connects the muscle, and the cartilage are basically present in the nose and ears, and the areolar in bone are present in the bone marrow, blood vessels, and they support in repair and fat storing, and the fat storing ones are the adipose tissues. Now, the muscular tissues, these consist of the elongated cells, also called the muscle fibers, and they show alternate light and dark bands. Therefore, they're also known as the striated muscles. Now, muscles contain specific proteins called as the contractile proteins, which contract and relax to cause the movement. Now, nervous tissue are highly specialized from being stimulated and then transmitting this stimulus very rapidly from one place to another within the body. The brain, the spinal cord, and nerves are all composed of the nervous tissue. You can see the figure of the nervous tissue. This is the nucleus. These projections are the dendrite, and this is the cell body. This is the axon, and these are the nerve endings. And an individual nerve cell can sometimes be up to a meter long, and many nerve fibers bound together by this connective tissue to make up a nerve, and the information passes through this nervous tissue by a gap which is called the synapse. So thank you so much, and I'll be back with another video lesson soon, and have a good day. Hello everyone. So bringing you another lesson of NCERT Science class 9th, and today we'll be looking at the chapter on diversity in living organisms, and this is presented to you by me, Deepanshu Singh. So this is a bit of information about me. You can follow me on Unacademy, and if you feel like, you can also contribute to the course. So looking at this chapter, we basically classify organisms, and this classification helps in exploring the diversity of the life forms. Now, the major characteristics which are considered for classifying the organisms into the five major kingdoms are whether they are made up of prokaryotic or eukaryotic cells, or whether the cells are living singly or organized into multicellular, and thus making them complex organisms. Now, obviously, unicellular organisms are less complex than multicellular organisms. Now, whether the cells have a cell wall or whether they prepare their own food, that is, they are autotrophs. Now, classification is also closely related to their evolution. So, as organisms evolve, they become more and more complex, and therefore the classification changes according to that. Now, biodiversity refers to the variety of life forms found in a particular region. So, as we all know, there are different biodiversity hotspots in the world depending on the condition where they are present, which takes into account various factors of like sunlight, rainfall, the surrounding patterns of vegetation, soil, etc. Now, the hierarchy of classification, biologists such as Unstackel and Robert Whittaker and Carl Weiss have tried to classify all living organisms into kingdoms. Now, the classification by Whittaker proposed that there are 5 kingdoms, that is Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. And then further subgroups were divided among these 5 kingdoms. And generally, the order which is followed is phylum for animals and division is for our plants. And then after that comes the class, the order, the family, genus, and the species. Now, species are a group of organisms that can interbreed among themselves. Now, plants are divided into 5 groups. These are the 5 groups which we'll be looking to detail, and animals are subsequently divided into 10 groups. We'll look at each one of them in detail in the coming slides. Now, the first division is according to Whittaker was Monera. So we'll look at these 5s in the coming slides. Now, the Monera is basically a bacteria or a blue crane algae or a cyanobacteria. They do not have any defined nucleus and or the organelles, and the cell walls may or may not be present, and they can be autotrophic or heterotrophic depending. So these are the examples of Monera. Now, Protista consists of the algae, diatoms, and protozoans, and these are the kind of unicellular eukaryotic organisms. Some of these organisms use appendages such as hair-like projections like cilia or whip-like flagella for moving around. So these are the example of Protista. We have amoeba over here, and Euglena has this flagella for moving around. So, and diatoms and these paramecium, and these are examples of Protista. Now, fungi, heterotrophic, these are the heterotrophic eukaryotic organisms, and they basically use decaying organic material as food, and therefore they are also known as saprophytes. Now, their cell walls are made up of a thick substance known as chitin, and as we all know that lichens are the symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi. And the examples of fungi are mushrooms, toadstool, molds, mildews, yeasts, etc. Now, Plantae consist of the multicellular eukaryotic plants with cell walls. These are autotrophs. They make their own food, and basically they use chlorophyll for photosynthesis. Animalia consist of all the organisms which are multicellular eukaryotes, and they obviously don't have cell walls. And as we all know that all animals basically are heterotrophs, that means they don't produce their own food. Now, these are the classification of Plantae kingdom, and the first one is the Thallophyta. They do not have any well differentiated body design, and the plant in these groups are commonly called as algae. Now, this is a diagram or a chart describing the plant kingdom. And the second one is the Bryophyta. These are called the amphibians of the plant kingdom, as they can live in both land and water. Now, the plant body is commonly differentiated to form stem and leaf-like structure. Mosses are example of these. Now, Pteridophyta are the plant bodies. In this are differentiated into roots, stems, and leaves, and have specialized tissue for the conduction of water and other substances. Now, the above three, the division of the type of species contains hidden reproductive organs. That is why they are known as cryptogamy. The cryptogamy, as you see in the chart, consists of these 3. Now, the phanerogamy consists of gymnosperm and the angiosperms. Now, gymnosperms are the plants of this group. They bear naked seeds and are usually perennial, evergreen, and woody. Examples are pine and deodar. Now, angiosperms are in this, the seeds develop inside an organ, which is modified to become a fruit. Mostly they consist of the flowering plants, and plant embryos in these seed structures are known as cotyledons, and they can be classified into monocots and dicots. Dicots have seeds with 2 cotyledons, and sometimes these cotyledons may become green when their seed germinates. These are also known as seed leaves. So an apple is an example of an angiosperm seed fruit, and this is an example of a gymnosperm. Now, the kingdom Animalia, we'll be looking at all the division of organisms in this kingdom. The first is the Porifera. Porifera are the organisms which have holes, and these are non-mobile. This is mobile. These are non-mobile animals attached to some solid support. They have an outer skeleton. Sponges are an example of this. Now, the Coelenterata are the animals living in water, and they show more body design of differentiation. They have cavities in the body. The examples are corals, hydra, jellyfish. Now, platyhelminthes are the body in these are bilaterally symmetrical. There are three layers of cell. These are also known as triploblastic. They have no true internal body cavity or column body, and they have the bodies are basically flattened or dorsiventral body. That means they are flat from top to bottom, and they can be either free living or parasitic. The examples are liver fluke and tapeworm. Now, the next one is the nematoda. Nematoda are also triploblastic. However, their body is cylindrical. In this, the body was dorsiventral, and there are tissues but no real organs. The examples are the filarial worms or the roundworms. The next one is the annelida. They are also triploblastic, but in addition, they also have a true body cavity, extensive organ differentiation, and they can be found in a variety of habitats: freshwater, marine water, as well as land. Examples are the earthworms and leeches. Next is the arthropoda. The arthropoda means jointed legs. They are probably the largest group of animals present, and they have a bilaterally symmetrical and segmented bodies. They have an open circulatory system. Examples of these are the prawns, butterflies, houseflies, spiders, scorpions, and crabs, etc. Next ones are the mollusks. They have coelomic cavities reduced in this, and there is a little segmentation. They have an open circulatory system and kidney-like organs for excretion. These have a foot that is used for moving around. Examples are the snails, octopus, etc. Now, echinodermata are spiny skinned organism. These are exclusively free living marine animals. They are also triploblastic and have a coelomic cavity. They have an outer skeleton of calcium carbonate. Examples are the starfish, sea cucumber, etc. Now the next ones are the protochordata. They have bilateral symmetrical triploblastic and have a coelom. The notochord in this have a long rod-like support structure that runs along the back of animals, separating the nervous tissue from the gut. They basically consist of marine animals like the balanoglossus. Now, vertebrata, these are the animals that have a true vertebral column and have internal skeleton. They all possess these qualities. Notochord, also nerve cord, triploblastic, have paired gill pouches, are columnate. Now, the vertebra can be divided into these five divisions. These are the Pisces or the cold-blooded two-chambered heart fishes. Reptilia, cold-blooded, they have scales and breathe through lungs. Amphibians have three-chambered hearts. In reptilia, crocodile is an exception which has four-chambered heart. Aves are the warm-blooded animals. These basically constitutes the birds which have four-chambered heart, and they lay eggs. Mammalias are warm-blooded animals, as we all know, and have four-chambered hearts. They have mammary glands for production of milk. Skin has hair, as well as sweat and oil glands. Platinus and echinida, they basically lay eggs. So yeah, that covers this portion of the chapter. Thank you, and have a good day.